Vaibhav. You can go ahead.
Messi, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, sorry. I just didn't realize that. Okay, a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Maitli Sundaramurthy.
And I, Vaibhav Goyal.
We take immense pleasure in inviting each one of you to Reflections, the flagship event of Prabandhan 2020. To give a gist about Reflections, it's a platform where cross-industry stalwarts come together to ideate on a topic, thereby they take us into an insightful session on how different industries react to the current business trends. Having said that, I would now like to introduce the topic for today's discussion, Self-Reliant India, an opportunity in making.
Prevalent times have highlighted the importance of indigenous capabilities. With the global economy knee down due to the pandemic, nations like India have hurled up the banner of self-reliance to achieve the sustainability. Not to forget that this movement has given a rise to plethora of questions, and that is why, ladies and gentlemen, today through their discussions, our panelists will evaluate this idea of self-reliance and decipher the plan of action. With no further delay, let us welcome the most dynamic panel of Reflection 2020.
First and foremost, I would like to introduce Mr. Rudra Shankar Roy, the General Manager, Thought Leader, Industrial Products and Supply Chain SME from IBM. Mr. Rudra Roy is an alumnus of St. Xavier's College in Kolkata and the very prestigious IIEST. Mr. Roy has more than 22 years of extensive experience working with the global clients across banking, industrial products, CPG, financial services, and airlines. He has led about 300 plus high-profile consulting and transformation engagement globally and applied supply chain management, operation strategy, Lean Six Sigma, TOM, and process automation across the industries and geographies. Mr. Roy also has experience setting up a startup, from laying the internal processes to getting the organization certified in the industry standards like ISO, QS, QMS, and ESEM. Thank you, sir, for your esteemed presence. We are delighted to have you with us today.
Next, we would like to introduce Mr. Jayant Mengani, Chief Finance Officer, DHL Supply Chain India Private Limited. Having completed his graduation from the University of Mumbai, Mr. Mengani holds various certifications under his belt, which include CIMA UK, ACCA UK, ACS, ACMA, and CFA from ICFA India. Mr. Mengani has more than 26 years of national and international experience in the finance and accounting domain. He has experience across diverse sectors ranging from pharmaceutical, FMCG, advertising, and media. Mr. Mengani has previously held affiliations with Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Publicis Group, Aspen, and Lonza before his current role at DHL. At DHL, he leads the finance functions and drives the organizational strategy as the Chief Finance Officer, along with the responsibility of full-time director, country compliance officer, and company secretary. Mr. Mengani's path-breaking initiatives and performance earned him a place in the top 20 CFOs in India at the CFO Leadership Summit 2018. Sir, it is an honor and privilege for the entire MBIT Kanpur community to have you with us today.
Moving on to our next speaker for the event, I would like to welcome Ms. Suparna Mitra, the Chief Executive Officer, Watches and Wearables Division at Titan Company Limited. We're all getting this excellent opportunity to hear from Ms. Suparna Mitra herself, who has an extensive experience in marketing and sales. Having graduated as an electrical engineer from Jadavpur University, she did her master's from IIM Calcutta. Ms. Mitra started her career as a management trainee in Hindustan Unilever Limited and has worked in several organizations like Arvind Brands, Talisma Corp, Titan Company Limited, to name a few. At Titan, she handled important portfolios, including regional business head, South and global marketing head, before escalating to the rank of CEO for watches and wearables. Recently, Ms. Mitra was featured on Impact's Top 50 Influential Women in Media, Marketing, and Advertising 2020. Apart from her work, she is also an avid reader and takes great interest in traveling. Thank you, ma'am, for being a part of Reflections. IIT Kanpur feels so honored to have you here with us.
Now let us welcome Mr. Puneet Jain, Managing Director, IHS Markit. Mr. Jain is an IIT Madras, University of Notre Dame, and ISB alumnus with the global work experience across different industries. While working at IHS Markit, Mr. Jain took charge of large transformation projects and led high-performing teams across multiple disciplines, which includes IT, big data, RPA, consulting, and corporate strategy, to name a few. Mr. Jan has an overall experience of over 2 decades in setting up and scaling large global capability centers for several Fortune 500 companies. As the chairman of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Jan promoted a number of US-India bilateral trade initiatives while working closely with the US Consulate and the Department of Commerce. Mr. Jan is one of the members of the IT panel of Confederation of Indian Industry. He has been actively promoting the partnership between industry and the government while driving the IT adoption among the MSMEs in India. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We are all delighted to have you here today.
Proceeding further, let me now introduce our next speaker for the event, Dr. Arul Shanmugasundaram, Chief of Innovation and Business Collaboration at Tata Power. Dr. Arul, a mechanical engineer from IIT Madras, completed his master's and also holds a PhD in system design and controls from Cornell University, New York. Dr. Arul has more than a decade of rich experience in the power sector. In Tata Power, he was a part of a team that has increased the company's profitable growth by 3 times in revenues. He has also led the entire EPC activity and has several award-winning projects under his belt. Dr. Arul also has 15 plus years of experience in system design and process control at Applied Materials. He secured the first customer for thin film manufacturing globally in India and secured contracts worth 500 million USD in just 3 years as Senior Director General Manager. He had presented in various forums organized by Asian Band Development, Power Lines, Renewable Congress, etc. I'm sure that we all will get great insights from sir. Thank you, sir, for being a part of Reflections.
Last but not the least, let me introduce our eminent panelist, Dr. Anub Singh, Professor at Department of Industrial and Management Engineering, IIT Kanpur. Dr. Anup, an accomplished and recognized academia, is the founder of country's first dedicated facility for regulatory research in the energy sector, the Center for Energy Regulation and the Energy Analytics Lab here at the Department of Industrial and Management Engineering. Post-engineering, Dr. Anup completed his master's in industrial engineering from Thapa University and earned his PhD in interfuel substitution from Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research. Dr. Anup, a visiting faculty at the Asian Institute of Thailand, has also served as the Deputy Commissioner in the Haryana Electricity Regulatory Commission. As a member of the working group in the Planning Commission of India, he worked on the power segment for the formulation of the 11th and the 12th five-year plan. Recently, the Florence School of Regulation, Italy, invited Dr. Anup as a delegate at the first Global Energy Forum. It is a great pleasure and honor to have Dr. Anup Singh on the panel today. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Once again, we welcome all our guests who have joined us this evening. So ladies and gentlemen, with no further delay, let us hand the session over to Mr. Rudra Shankar Roy to initiate and moderate the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Maithili. Thank you, Vaibhav, for the introduction of the panel. And I'm privileged and honored to be part of today's session. I think this is the first time in India any of the institution is going live in their annual event and with an array of the superb panel, right? So let me thank to each and every panel members who has joined me today as a speaker and the panelist. And this will give a great insight to all of us in the topic that we are going to discuss today. That's the self-reliant India. And I believe all are the stalwarts in their own dimensions, including the young leaders that you all are from the IIT B School of Kanpur. So let me start with a quote of Swami Vivekananda, and I feel this is what we should call out in terms of the most advanced way, because he is the master of master who has shown us a different path of the world, right? So let me take a quick break of what he has guided us, right? So he talked about the great secret of the true success of a true happiness is this: the man and woman who ask for no return. The perfectly unselfish person is the most successful. So yes, we all need to be really successful, and we should look towards building up the nation in a different dimensions, right? And that's where you all, being the budding leaders of India, who can take up one idea and make that one idea of your life, to think of it, dream of it, and I'll say life to lead the idea on it, right? So this is what we are going to look forward today. And giving the context of this particular topic, I'll just come to the point as in terms of our honorable Prime Minister. He talks about the India as a self-reliant in the 5 things, right? So the 5 pillars of the self-reliant India. So we were talking about the intent, we are talking about the innovation, we are talking about the investment, the inclusions, and the infrastructure. So as we look forward in terms of how we should make the world proud that each and everything which is getting made in India is spreading the world. And taking that to forward, I would request Mr. Jayant to share his viewpoints in terms of how the economy is going to take a shape in terms of the various intentions and the infrastructure that we are going to have today. Let us hear from Mr. Jayant on this particular aspect. Over to you, Mr. Jayant.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Everyone can hear me clearly? I hope so. Great. So, good evening, everyone. I think we are around 110 people on this call. First of all, thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this very important topic, Atmanirbhar or self-reliant India. Before dwelling into the topic of Atmanirbhar or self-reliant India, it's important that we understand why this has been launched and why this particular vision of Atmanirbhar or self-reliant India has been launched now. Why it has become more important after 74 years of independence for India. So let us rewind a little, a bit of pre-COVID as to what was existing in India and what was existing or what was happening globally. If you see very clearly, there is a global slowdown. When we were just before pre-COVID, everybody was talking about a global recession or a global slowdown. You talk about various economies. Economy of Europe is not growing. Middle East is not growing. Uh, there are issues of tariff war between US and China. Then you come to the Asian economies. If you talk about, there are only 3 countries, which is US and India and China. India was sort of forecasted to grow at around 5.5% GDP. China was expected to grow at around 8.5, and of course US was growing at a decent rate. So broadly, what is important is overall the economy had slowed down. There was lack of demand, and then when you come to India, it's important to understand the demography or the dynamics. On today's date, India's population is around 135 crores. I'm speaking a bit general and a bit relating to figures because I'm a man of finance and figures. So my interest profile is more on the figures part. As it's important to understand the facts and figures before we straight away jump to what is the self-reliant India and Atmanirbhar and all that. So considering the population of 135 crores, independence of 74 years, we have been growing at a Hindu rate of some 5% year on year. The GDP is growing. In terms of the top 10 GDP countries, India is somewhere around 5th or 6th position, somewhere very close to UK. And the figure is around 2.65 trillion. So when PM came in the second term, he started talking about, we need to convert India into a 5 trillion economy by let's say year 2025 or something, if I remember well. That was the thought process. There was always a hue and cry that there are not enough jobs, there is a lot of unemployment. As per specified data, the unemployment rate is 10% for India. It must have gone up now to almost 25% or more. And then suddenly we are struck with this COVID pandemic. So from last 6 months, again, things have been very difficult globally. Now there has been a marked change in this last 6 months. The key change is that India is trading with China around 75 billion trade we have. Let's talk about foreign exchange. Let's talk about imports. 80% of the imports are defense supplies, are oil and gold. And that is where India basically consumes the maximum foreign exchange reserves. There was a plan and there was what do you call, a clarion call of Make in India, where the PM and the entire Indian government was inviting foreign investors that please come and produce in India. India's exports have been dropping consistently. It's now a share of almost 20%, 25% of the GDP comes from exports. There are three sectors basically. If you talk about agriculture, manufacturing, and services, services contributes around 50%, agriculture is around 20%, and balance is around manufacturing. And it has been realized very clearly that agriculture operates from rural, manufacturing operates from semi-urban, and your services operates from urban. And all three are disconnected. So there is a major issue from connecting point of view. Let's talk about the middle class, which has been driving the demand. There has been a slowdown, there is an unemployment, there is not enough generation of jobs in the market. Every year, just to tell you, 10 to million graduates or postgraduates join the Indian workforce. So there needs to be a job generation of 10 to 12 million every year. India is going to become the most populated country by 2050. It will cross China also. So it's important to understand all these dynamics. India is very widely distributed. There are about 37 states, 29 states, and balance are union territories. There has been a slowdown. A lot of people talk, that demonetization slowed down the economy. The GST, which was introduced in 2017, slowed down the economy. But I don't know how many people are aware that there is a parallel economy called black money, which contributes around 40% of the GDP estimated. Second, I don't know how many people know that with us why the need was there for demonetization, because there was a national security threat. There were containers and containers of crores of fake currency of 500 and 1000 what do you call rupee notes, which were printed by Pakistan and which had reached the country shores, and some part of it was already into circulation. When demonetization was done, 113% of the currency came back. How can it be possible? But that's the fact. So, and with due respect, there was a collusion of the banking industry and the bank managers also, who sort of, colluded with some guys or some leaders and, converted black money to white money, etc. etc. There is no end to talking negatively. So the moral of the story is that now there is a clear-cut need of self-reliant India. Yes, this Atmanirbhar is not a new word. Let me clarify. This has been quoted by the past planning commissions also. And whether it is Indira Gandhi or Lal Bahadur Shastri, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Green Revolution, etc., etc., it has been very loosely used at self-sufficiency. Whereas the PM has now very clearly clarified that when I speak of Atmanirbhar, I'm talking about self-reliance, not self-sufficiency only. So what is very important, I would put it very simply, is that, now there is a call to connect India technologically, digitally, point number one. And second is to generate enough jobs. India needs to grow at almost 8% year on year from now if it has to become, or if it has to be called a rich country or a developed country. You must have also noticed globally, it is the rich countries who decide the global policies. The problem, I will come to that. what my objective was is to highlight as to why this has come now. Why self-reliant India is very, very important. And you must have seen the reforms have already started. There are reforms in the offing for labor. Agri reforms have already been kicked in. Coal sector is now open to private sector also. So all these changes are happening. So what is very important is that before we get into the discussion of self-reliant India or Atmanirbhar, it's very important that we understand that what is the importance and what is the need of self-reliant India as on today, and why there is an urgency. I'll just touch upon a bit of China. That yes, there is a lot of dependency. There is a trade of 75 billion. The whole world has realized that now you cannot trust China. From last 20 years, China has been having a dream of becoming a superpower. They always wanted to become a global supplier of goods. They have been undercutting products. They have been what you call producing a bit lower quality products, but then the world is accepting it in terms of what you call cheaper inputs and easier access to inputs in all sectors. So that dependency has really gone up very, very high. But now because of COVID, the trust levels have gone down. People have realized that this globalization is in fact affecting the local industry and the local economy. So that is the reason, that punchline of vocal for local or from globalization to localization, that is what is nothing but self-reliant India or
Let me
Atmanirbhar.
ask you, Mr. Jayant, a quick one, right? So as you mentioned, like local for it's a global, right? So we need to also look for the supply chain aspects, right? When we are going from the self-reliant India and making it into the global landscape. So let me understand from you how you feel that is there a need to create a robust supply chain uh, in terms of the locally I am talking about, which is going to help India to play a key role in our global supply chain landscape.
Yeah,
What is your point of view on this, Mr.
yeah,
Jain?
absolutely. So two things have come out from COVID. One is because of the lockdown, production and transportation of goods affected supply chain in a big way. That is point number one. Second is the entire international cargo movement by way of air or by way of shipping. At the start, at least for 1 month, 3 weeks, got surely affected. Now also passenger traffic is not open all across the world. So when you talk about those industries, which are very much, let's talk about pharma industry. Pharma industry is very much dependent on various APIs and inputs, which are the basic raw material to produce medicinal, various antibiotics or various drugs or formulations on import of APIs. And China is the major supplier of APIs or the basic inputs. So the entire supply chain got disrupted, whether it is international or whether it is local within the economy, within the geography of India because of this lockdown, because of COVID. So that has really opened the eyes of everyone sitting there in Delhi and everywhere that, what can we do? You see your food inflation. Food inflation is now 7 to 8%. It has really gone up. Whereas in such case of lockdown or such kind of, on one side we say the volumes have gone down, there is hardly any demand, then why should inflation go up? So these are all indicators that supply chain is a very important, what do you call, lifeline, whether it is of goods or whether it is of services. In my own industry where I come from in logistics, I am from the supply chain where our major line of business is warehousing and transport. We run around 160 warehouses all across India, and almost 90% were closed because the government allowed only telecom and essential services or essential goods to be open. So luckily we had varied clients, and as the lockdown lifted after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, the warehouses got opened, and as the transport opened, the volume started coming out, the inbound started, outbound started. But the first 3 months, April, May, June, were very badly impacted in terms of business, and the entire supply chain got disrupted. And we are dependent on manufacturing and trading companies who are our customers. So if they don't send the volumes or there is no demand, what do we do? And second is
It is a good
labor.
point. It is a good point, Mr. Jayant. And I think now what we have seen in our uh, ages before this pandemic, pandemic is not the only thing that we have to live with today. And yes, pandemic has taught us a lot of things which we have not experienced in past. And with this kind of experience that we are going through, it is a test and learn phase for all of us, right? So in this test and learn phase, we have seen how the supply chain work. We have seen how I will say from the standard supply chain that we used to play. And I come from the manufacturing background. I've been into the operation and supply chain consulting for a long time in the industry. And we have seen it was when we used to do the supply chain work, it was some supply chain planning or the operational planning or the execution of the supply chain, right? Now from there, we are moving to the digital supply chain today, right? So that's where the digital transformation is coming into play. So let me go back to Suparna and to understand better in terms of how world is looking in terms of the reliable partners, because Suparna is from uh, Titan, and she is into the more close to the consumers. So let us understand from Suparna how the world is looking from a trusted, reliable partner. And I believe our country, our nation, India, has the potential. We have the strength. We have the ability. We have been giving this credential all over the world. And in terms of the customer service, in terms of the reliable partners, in terms of doing business in a trusted manner. So there are a lot of things that India can turn over. So let us understand from Suparna, and I will pass on to Suparna to share her point of view.
Thank you, Rudra. It's firstly a great pleasure and honor to be on this panel. Dear students, you are all very, in a way, fortunate that you are students now, and you will go into a world where the mantra, which is just a word, is actually going to be implemented, and it will become a reality. So when I hear about Atmanirbhar and what Rudra talked about it, what does it really mean for the consumer? If you start from the consumer, how does this entire wheel of economy and become more self-reliant in India? I think the one name that came to my mind, and it wasn't Titan, was actually Amul. Think about Amul. What a glorious story of Atmanirbhar. Think of the business model. The business model is completely innovative. It has come up from the grassroots. It is an aggregator, much before the word aggregator became, cool and hip. But it is actually an ecosystem where the producers are multiple, in fact, in thousands and lakhs of producers come together and they collaborate. And then the corporation takes over, takes the raw material, processes it, and value adds it. And I'll come to that in a minute, and the kind of innovation and the value addition that they've done. And then distributes it to consumers all over India. And therein is the story of, Atmanirbhar, self-reliance in the product, in the value chain, in the supply chain, in the business model. And this is one of the biggest brands in India, totally trusted by millions and millions of people. And the beauty of this brand and whatever work that it has done over so many years is that it has only taken it forward. It hasn't stagnated. Not for a decade, not for a year have they continued to do what they were doing. This morning I went to the grocery store and I saw Amul's very high percent, I think 90% dark chocolate. So somebody in Amul is looking at where are the trends going. And things like, dark chocolate is used to be a niche product, is now becoming very, very popular. And the kind of value addition and the kind of new products, I don't know how many of you have heard of the haldi doodh that Amul came up with. in the last couple of months. So in the middle of the pandemic, somebody, not some one person, teams in Amul have thought of what are Indians craving? Of course, they're craving dairy products, but they're also seriously considering immunity and go back to our traditions. And that is Atmanirbhar at the level of innovation in product. And somebody said, okay, haldi doodh, everybody knows that, you know, you put turmeric in milk and it's a great immunity booster. And they actually made it. It's a beautiful, cute little, you know, can, and it's doing fabulously well. So, you know, the lessons that I take from this Amul example are the following. One is collaboration. And when I'm saying collaboration, maybe not everybody is a cooperative like Amul, but the power of the ecosystem. And this is equally true for high-tech products or engineering products. It doesn't have to be an agri product. But this is the era. The way we will become Atmanirbhar as a country is if we are seeking out win-win partnerships and collaborations with others. And some of those collaborations may even be outside India. But somehow the core thought and the core business proposition is entirely ours. So this was, you know, these were some of the thoughts that I thought of. And I will now come a little bit into the context of Titan. So like we make watches and most of our watches are made in India. But in the last few months, we've also been examining every single component that comes in, that goes into the manufacture of a watch. And there are some key components that are not made in India. So it's a bit like, you know, that old story about the battle was won because of something, and and it goes to the soldier and then to the horse, and the nail in the shoe of the horse, right? The nail in the shoe of the horse, if that tiny little component is outside the country, then literally at any point, due to geopolitical or regulatory disturbances, one can get into a serious risk position on business. So I think the big learning for us is that every little component, and it might be only 1% of the entire value chain, but if you can't make it without it, then in a way you're risked. So these were some of my thoughts on the journey of self-reliance for India. And over back to you, Rudra.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Suparna, for the insightful stories that you have shared. I'm going to say that's a pretty good learning for everyone, what Amul has done for the country, right? Because I still remember in the what the cartoons comes into in the coverage or the branding of the Amul. So they keep giving the flavor of made in India in every steps of their life. I mean to say that's what you, and I still remember there is a quote when SAIL, the Steel Authority of India Limited, they used to say a little bit of steel in everyone's life. So now I can see the things that which Amul is taking forward, that every bit of Indian product in everyone's life. So that's how Amul is getting into the space. And as you rightly mentioned on the Titan also. So now what I understand, like the products which we are making in India, say for made in India, and that is getting for the world. So that's what we are calling as a made for world when I started the discussion today. So that's what the vision of our government as well as our honorable Prime Minister has. So how you feel, Suparna, in terms of the reducing the dependencies on the imported items, because there are a lot of dependencies we have in the imported items, whether into any of this service lines or in the sectors or in the industries. I'm talking about the across dependencies of the imported items that India would be seeking from the rest of the world. And do we have the ability or the capability today to stand out and say, okay, we ensure that we make the products in India and we don't have any dependencies? What is your thought on this?
So it is a much larger and it's a very complex subject, right? We've been moving towards a globalization, direction for maybe a couple of decades, and it's only in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And of course, COVID has been what I call the trend accelerator. The trend was already there, where China was doing its thing, US was putting up its guards, and the European Union was doing its own thing. Of course, countries like India too. But the trend was there even before. So here's the thing. I really go back to that point about ecosystem. When I'm talking about, and I'll give you our example because that's what I know very well. In the making of a watch, we have our factories. We have 5 manufacturing locations in India, and we pretty much make the entire watch end to end. The reason why we are able to do it, and we need to do it in a much bigger way than we are doing right now, is that there are MSMEs that make different parts. So, if you go to the automobile industry, the entire automobile ancillary ecosystem that gets built, and a lot of it is geographic, right? So there are there are provinces in China where everything which is related to a particular industry, all of those smaller units are in that hub. In some ways, Silicon Valley is the digital hub. Of course, digital, by the very nature of being digital, you can actually be in Bangalore and be part of Silicon Valley, and a lot of people are. But as far as manufacturing is concerned, I think the way to really, for us to become totally self-reliant is for bigger companies and organizations, and with the help of the government, really help the MSMEs build up the entire ecosystem in different hubs. It could be, in different parts of India. And that is what actually will generate a lot of, there will be a lot of positive fallouts for it. It will generate employment, it will generate further demand. Demand, and the more consumption there is, the more production there is, there is more employment. So it's a very virtuous cycle. COVID, unfortunately, has come as a big shock, and it's kind of stopped everyone in its tracks. Fundamentally, what needs to be done is that we are not just talking about the big companies and the big corporations and the government, but really talking about I would say the ancillary or the satellite, ecosystems of some of these manufacturing, the processes or the big centers. That's really my thought on this.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought, Suparna. And as we all understood, right? So MSAB, we have the lakhs of MSABs in India, right? And I'm close to the manufacturing as Puneet is, right? So we are a hardcore manufacturer and coming from the manufacturing background, and we also thought like there will be a smarter manufacturing to play a role in the today's world. And I believe in I'm just naming IBM into this space, because we were talking about the smart manufacturing, we are talking about the smart supply chain. Definitely that is going to be helpful in terms of the artificial intelligence world that we are driving today, right? And now just taking this to forward, as I mentioned, like the MSABs are going to be the driving engine for the India's overall growth in this current scenario, as you also rightly mentioned. So let me ask Puneet, what is your thought in terms of the MSABs are going to be the driving engine for this new normal, or I will say in the self-reliant India?
Okay, thank you, Rudra. So I'm largely going to talk about semiconductor manufacturing in India. Probably I'll start off with a quick question to the audience. Could you all tell me how many private semiconductor manufacturing plants are there in India? Do you think it's 5 to 10, 20, 30? What's your best guess? I just want the audience to answer this question, and then I'll start off.
Puneet, we are not opening up for the audience.
Okay, sure. Okay, so that's fine.
But for the benefit of the audience, you can note down all your questions, and you can directly
that's fine.
Puneet and Rule, and Anub at any point of time when we are opening up to the Q&A.
Sure, fine. So, the answer is actually zero. I mean, Dr. Arul possibly knows it. I didn't know he also worked at Applied Materials. Even I had worked at Applied Materials. So in fact, in India, we only have 2 semiconductor manufacturing units, and both of them are in the public sector. So there's a semiconductor lab in Chandigarh, and there's also a defense semiconductor manufacturing plant in Bangalore. But largely, both of them are being used only for defense and aerospace production and only for the Indian government requirements. We all know that semiconductors are used in every gadget that we are all using, right? Whether it's our smartphones, whether it's laptops, set-top boxes, appliances, TVs, everything needs many, many chips, right? And to put things in context, India imports roughly almost about 50 to $60 billion of electronic components every year. And out of that, almost 20 to $25 billion consists of semiconductors. So that's the scale of imports that India is currently doing. And none of this is manufactured in India. So just for you all to understand, a semiconductor manufacturing plant is also called a fab or a foundry. And just to set up a fab, it needs at least $7 to $10 billion of investment. It obviously depends on the type of fab that you're setting up and the technology that you're using in terms of nanometers and other aspects. But it's at least $7 to $10 billion of investment. And why is that so high? Reason being, obviously, just to make a single chip, it goes through several hundred pieces of equipment and processes and systems. You also need a, fab environment, which is an environment wherein there's no dust particles, no hair particles, otherwise it damages the chip. You need millions of gallons of water on a daily basis. You need uninterrupted power to run the fab because you cannot have a fab having a shutdown due to power failure. So in fact, if you look back, India tried to set up a fab way back in 2006, somehow didn't work out. Then in 2015, again, there was a big push. The government said that they would possibly invest about $5 billion. They tried a public-private partnership. A couple of players came in, but somehow that also didn't materialize. So, those have been some of the challenges so far in trying to set it up. And also the other thing which we need to realize is the fact that China has spent over $500 billion in the last decade in setting up the fab infrastructure. If you see the world's semiconductor production, 77% of that is done in Asia. And within Asia, it's largely China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore. And they're largely feeding the rest of the world, right? And the other thing which we really need to worry about is all our defense forces, right, who are there at the borders, our satellite equipment, everything uses chips. How do we know that those chips are not compromised? How do we know that there's no spyware, malware in any of those chips? Malware or spyware could even bring down any country's power grids, right? We also saw in the case of Iran, where the nuclear power plant, had come down a few years back, and that was possibly due to malware. Several countries have had the power grid shutting down. So it's really very, very important for India to at least have one fab to ensure that we are manufacturing our critical chips in-house without, any of the chips being compromised. I think the Indian Electronic and Semiconductor Association has done a lot. They're trying to focus. In fact, they've come up with a very interesting idea called 1K, 10K, and 100K. And basically what it stands for is 1K startups in the next few years. And of these 1K startups, at least 100 should be fabless startups. 10K IPs from these 1K startups, and 100K crore, that's basically 100K crore of revenue from these startups over the next few years. So we can discuss more later in terms of what should be done to set up this infrastructure. But I think it's very, very important when we talk about self-reliant India, we first need to be self-reliant in making our own chips. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for us as we move into this digital world.
That's a good point, Puneet, and I think it is more we should have an impact in terms of the sustainability of the self-reliant India as a theme, right? And as you mentioned in terms of the defense, right? So there are a lot of things which is happening in the defense, and I would like to hear from you, like what is your thought in terms of uh, as a nation, we should encourage entrepreneurship in the defense sector or not? That's number one. And the second thing I'll also ask, like, how there are a lot of multinational coming with the big responsibilities for their obligations and other things, right? So, and I would also like to hear from other panelists on this particular topic as we start with you. So let me understand what is your point of view on those aspects.
Yeah, I think, the US has done it very well. Even India encourages it, right? Having the private partnership and encouraging the private players to get into defense, because you could have your agreements in place to protect the IP, to protect, the production and other aspects. But surely, with the startup being encouraged in India, I definitely think we should do more of that, because not everything can be done by the government, right? We really need to encourage more of public-private partnerships, and it's been happening, and I think we should do more of that. Also, the government doesn't have all the funding by itself, right? I think the other important aspect which we need to discuss as a nation to become self-reliant India is to have seed funding in each of these areas, whether it's healthcare, whether it's supply chain management, whether it's chip manufacturing. We really need seed funding, which sort of is missing in India. That depth and scale is missing of what it is there, let's say in the US or Europe. So we could discuss more about that later as well.
Yeah, sure. So we definitely, I'm just making a note of it, and I'll circle back to all the panelists on the seed funding in terms of the various sectors and how the government, the message should go to the government as well from our end, from this particular discussion. What are the necessary steps to be taken in the later phase of the time when we all can support the notion, right?
Right.
So, and I'll come back to you, Puneet, later on. Let me hear from Arul. Arul, you have been into the industry for a long time, and as we all are looking into the structural reforms for the country, right? So let me understand, what is your point of view in terms of what should be the structural reforms that we all need to play as a change agent in the course of the changes that we are planning for the country?
I think, okay, I wanted to touch upon a couple of things I think Puneet had covered. Puneet was talking about in fact, even last year I was reviewing a semiconductor manufacturing setup, right? What is that that we need to do for semiconductor manufacturing in India? And I think that the numbers are mind-boggling. The level of investment required is quite high. The expectations on return is a very long time. So it's quite difficult for anyone in India to set up a greenfield manufacturing. So the ideal entry point for semiconductor manufacturing, I still believe, is getting the majors, whether it's Intel or a TSMC or a Samsung, to come and set up a fab in India as one of their fabs. And still, I think the challenges of water and all those things are there, right? So I think, so yes, the semiconductor is a huge lift in terms of investments. I think the government honestly has not played it well. They've been somehow focused on land developers. I know I was very much involved in the 2007, 8, 10 discussions. They would tie up with some land developers. JP doing a semiconductor fab is just a joke.
Yes, JP is the name of it.
It's just a joke, because what does he know about semiconductor? He can give land, and that's hardly a 1% or not even a 0.1% of the cost, right? So I think so there have been some bad thought processes from the government side. And I think I want to come back into solar per se. So now, look, semiconductor is a complex transistor with many, many steps, correct? And solar is a very simple diode with a single layer. And we have not solved that. So where we go for semiconductors, correct? So I think, of course, solar, the challenges are slightly different. And I think, so one of the things we need to look for is what is that we need to do for, and I'll cover that a little bit. And I wanted to kind of go back to my main thing I wanted to talk about today was this on climate change, essentially, right? Because what is that we can do in Atmanirbhar? If you look in here, you have three waves of this coming in. You have the COVID, which is happening now. You have the recession, which is coming immediately. And then I think if all of you have read the Bill Gates article, the next huge wave, which is a much bigger tsunami than the COVID, is the climate change, which is going to happen in a big way in a very short time. So I think what the COVID has done, I don't know how many of you follow the United States politics. I think there's a gentleman called Rahm Emanuel, who was the chief of staff of Barack Obama. And the one thing he said was, look, there is no crisis to be wasted. The crisis is an opportunity. And today, I think COVID in some ways is an opportunity for us to really make the slogan of Atmanirbhar real. Because what's happened because of the COVID is, one, there is a distress with the Chinese supply chain. That forget the international markets, even from Indian market standpoint, we have many customers, even a smaller MSMEs and commercial customers and industrial customers, they don't want Chinese panels because there is a sense of distress that has developed across the ecosystem. Before, if I were going to offer him India panel is more expensive, would you want it? He would say, no, I want the cheapest or the latest technology, blah, blah. Now he wants an India panel only. So I think there is a widespread recognition in the country that we need to have our own manufacturing and we should support our manufacturing. I think that is a great outcome of all the negatives that COVID has brought. I think that's a positive development that COVID has brought into the country, right? And I think, and also you can see the industry leaders, they also recognize that we need to have a internal supply chain. I think Suparna Mitra mentioned that also, that Titan is looking at every element of the structures, right? So I think, so that's something that's happening. So now what is this opportunity? And if you look at what the European governments are doing, as the European governments have done is, they've taken, of course, US has pumped a lot of trillions of dollars and inflated the stock market. I'm sure how many of you follow the NASDAQ and Dow Jones, especially the NASDAQ. It's 17 hours. Especially the NASDAQ is at its highest levels of valuation. So, but that's helped in the United States. But I think if you look at Europe, what they have done is they've taken 25% of the stimulus money and said they will invest in climate change and accelerate the processes of this, right? So now, if you think of, and there are other things that are also happening. If you see the pictures, you see the fires in California, and you can see increasingly the Googles and Amazons and Microsoft saying, I will be carbon neutral. And in fact, some of them have a goal that I will undo all the carbon emissions I've done in the last carbon since of me of the last 30 or 40 or 50 years of my existence, and I'm going to undo it and then capture the carbon, right? I think so. There's a lot of recognition, especially given the fires, and I have a lot of friends in the Silicon Valley who see the smoke, and then they all report saying, or in Seattle also they see it. So I think so. There's a lot of recognition on this aspect of wanting to move this needle faster, right? Yeah. And so I'll just quickly run through it if you don't mind.
Sure.
So see that's one. What is that needs to be done for this happening? Of course, all of us know you have to go from coal plants to solar and wind. You have to turn the page on coal, but that's only a very small part of the climate change.Maybe that's only a 25% problem where you're moving from this to that, right? But there are many problems yet to be solved or addressed. And that is to convert your vehicles, transportation to electricity. Of course, the EV vehicles are coming, but I think there's still adoption is slow. There needs to be new business models to increase the adoption. So you have to convert your process factories, like whether you're steel manufacturing or aluminum manufacturing or chemical manufacturing, into non-fossil fuels. You have to convert whatever which is not running off electricity in your homes to electric sources. So I think there is a fair amount of electrification. There's also a need to replace fossil fuels. And certainly, I think one opportunity that comes in this whole space is hydrogen. So hydrogen does provide an opportunity, the hydrogen generation and carbon capture. I think these are all new fields, and Europe is making a big investment. I think a small company like Portugal got some $30 billion worth of proposals to for the hydrogen economy, and that's just a very small country. So Indian government is also looking at it, but today India honestly has not done any COVID recovery proposals per se. I think there is no, so I think when the government announces the what some sort of funds for this, or releases funds for some economic recovery, I think they should be looking at the European model is view I have. But of course, I think the one thing I want to say is when you talk about solar manufacturing, that's why we talked about semiconductors, you need the entire supply chain, not the issue. Technology is commoditized to a large degree in solar. And in semiconductor, it's not the case, but in solar, it's fairly commoditized. But it's still taking a lot of time to do it because the government had some misfires in terms of while there was an intent, there was a duty imposed, but then the duty encouraged Chinese imports rather than the way the duty was executed, right? So I think the policy makers have to pay a lot of attention to the details in terms of how to implement policies so that they manufacturing. And then we need to look at the entire supply chain, not just the higher level elements of it. I think these two elements have to be addressed in the overall context.
I agree with you, Arun. So as you rightly mentioned, like, so the climate change, getting the space from the into the solar energy, making more efficient in terms of the energy consumptions, the savings, in terms of the analytics that can play a real big I mean to say role when we are talking about the analytics in the energy, right? So that's how we are going to handle the smarter analytics, whether the IoT plays a role or a big data plays a role here, or the AI can be into the energy sector, right? So AI in energy sector can be a useful thought today. So let me hear back from Professor Dr. Anub Singh. So what is your thought in terms of when we are going to save in every parts, whether it is electric vehicles, whether it is a building analytics that has to be played a role in terms of the energy that is going to be utilized and for the sustainable manner, right? So what is your thought on this?
Thanks, Rudra. At the very outset, let me congratulate the team for the management team at Department of Industrial and Management Engineering for organizing this online event. At the very outset, let me take the thread where Arul mentioned something about solar. So we currently have a solar generation capacity of about 35 gigawatt. And our target, which was supposed to be met by 2022, is about 100 gigawatt. So we are just about at 1/3 of that target. But in terms of manufacturing capacity, we have not really been able to encash about on such a aggressive target, which I'll still call it aggressive. Somehow it seems like we may be missing the bus as far as our introduction to the semiconductor manufacturing line is concerned. And that is, I think, which was highlighted earlier as well. So from the energy sector points as a whole, there are two levels of imports that we do. So one of the imports happens in terms of fuel itself. So I'll touch upon that later. But let me first go to the import of technology or equipment. The sector as a whole imports power equipment. It imports power conversion equipments, generation equipments, and of course these solar panels, which largely come from China, being the cheaper ones. Given that we have really attempted at a number of instances to promote local manufacturing by linking it with the ongoing bidding process, we haven't seen really the ecosystem coming up to help it. See, government can only enable it. but somehow the manufacturers or even investors in this industry, they have held themselves back, but they were not very sure that how far this industry will provide them a assured market in future, and they will be able to face the challenge from China. So the advantage with respect to the import from China has to come primarily from the productivity that the Indian manufacturing can deliver, the skills that that India offers, rather than on the back of high duties or on the back of the current levels of dollars. As far as the import of fuel itself is concerned, we are currently importing about 100 billion worths of oil. And in terms of coal, I think we are already importing close to about 200 million tons of coal every year. And both of these feed primarily into the electricity. And then, of course, they go into the other sectors also in transport. And for coal, of course, it goes into cement, for iron and steel, etc. The import of coal, of course, can be handled rather easily because it's something which the Coal India Limited and the other subsidiaries, and now, of course, the coal sector has been opened up for private investment in a much bigger way, in a much more open fashion. So we should be able to address that. But as far as the oil import is concerned, we are really not going to become self-reliant on in terms of oil, because it's not there. It's the only Rajasthan block which we have discovered over the last couple of decades, but otherwise we don't really have a significant discovery in the country. So we are not expecting that to happen really at the click of a button. But what we see is as an opportunity that's emerging for us, and that's in terms of electric vehicles. Now, this is something is not an opportunity for us to be missed. Remember, we have lost the race when the world was running for semiconductor manufacturing. We more or less seems to have lost the race as far as the solar panel manufacturing is concerned. Now the next wave that is coming up is from the electric vehicles, and India offers a huge market, and that will help address an important concern for India, which is increasing oil import. But as well as it will also address something which Arul mentioned about in the context of climate change. And given the fact that if we can mix that up and marry that with high renewable energy targets for the country, we are not only able to avoid the import of the oil and coal, but we are also able to ensure that we are able to meet our requirements in more environmentally friendly manner. Now, of course, the EV industry itself presents its own challenges, and one of the most important challenges that comes is in the form of the availability of rare earth metals. And unfortunately, we don't have it. Just like we are not endowed with really oil, we are not really endowed with rare earth metals. So what we need to do is to really not just tap on the global supply chain of rare earth, but also look at the technology which can enable us to recycle that materials once for each and every molecule that enters the country. That's the only way for us to ensure it. Otherwise, today we are importing oil, in future we'll be importing batteries. So battery manufacturing is something which we need to really look at. Something which lies on our horizon, and that's something I think is hydrogen, which has not really been commercialized as such in a big way, and where we don't see really much activity specifically in the Chinese context. Of course, there are companies which are working on it. We have not seen large R&D happening which aims to commercialize that in future. So we can't really fight in terms of economics on those products which we lost bus maybe a couple of decades ago. So whatever is the new opportunities that are appearing for us, we should not be missing that. I think that's one thing. And second is in the context of defense. I think defense import is amongst one of the largest, like it was mentioned by Jayant in the beginning, that gold, oil, and defense are the three manufacturing. So defense manufacturing is something which we need to do it, because this is something which will continue to be required all throughout the future, and we really can't be really expecting the world all the time to meet our needs. And I think rightly so, we have taken some initiative as of now, but given the time, if institutions like IITs, they are able to provide enabling environment for incubation of such companies who want to engage into armament design. I'm sure India can do something about it in a perhaps much shorter time span, given the kind of skills that we have.
Yep. Thank you, sir. And just wanted to understand a little bit more in terms of, because we all are talking about the semiconductor, energies, utilities, and other aspects, right? And because the most, I will say the industry which got affected is the hospitality industry, because they could not survive because of this situation. And from Made in India to Made it Global, we know there are a lot of hospitality industry, they're living in and out, but and where they really need to have more focus in terms of doing the analytics in terms of energy saving. So what is your thought point on this? So do you think that this is going to be an in-house uh, product that has to be created for each and every building or the offices that we have today, where we can save a lot of energy, which can translate it into the different dynamics?
Okay. I think, and this is something to do with also the kind of behavior that consumers often exhibit, right? So the Indian consumer is, of course, is still attuned to the idea of savings, right? This is something which we are time and again told by our parents, that not to waste electricity here or not to waste something, because we have lived through in scarcity in general. As far as the analytics is concerned, there are two aspects to it. One is about our ability to gather the relevant data using the sensors. And also the second part is our ability to analyze data in a fashion that can help us take informed decisions, either from a physical intervention or in an automated fashion. So I think Internet of Things is something that's a low-hanging fruit for us, I will say, given the fact that most of our engineering colleges or educational institutions have not been well endowed with the technological infrastructure. But in spite of that, if you just look at the spectrum of the projects that the students give, which means they are very much attuned to the idea of how quickly they are able to bring up something useful, marry the hardware and the software, and they are able to deliver something useful to the world. And I recall when you mentioned this, I was talking to somebody at NUS, and we asked him that what was the cost of this, building automation that you have, and you have this, analytics which happens. And I can tell you, this was the kind of cost that I was mentioned for per room basis, which was air conditioned, was humongous. We couldn't really think about it. So we, in fact, started thinking about working on this with the small technological intervention. And we are currently doing a project here also to basically enable some of the institutions which do not have, because 90% of our hospitality industry and even government institutions have air conditioning facilities, but they do not really have the kind of analytics ability. Neither they have the relevant, these old equipments have the relevant sensors. So I think these are small interventions where, of course, we can not only help bring up the technological prowess that we have, but at the same time help the country reduce the import of energy and address the climate change also.
Yeah, let's understand more on this, and let's see how we as a team collaboratively can work together and to put it forward to the government in terms of the investment that is needed. And definitely I will touch base at the during the course of our discussion. And I think with the point of interest of time, I'll move forward. And I just wanted to understand more from Mr. Jain in terms of what do you feel, because we were talking in terms of working continuously to create a favorable ecosystem that is going to help us in terms of taking the notion of I'll say the self-reliant India forward, right? And this in this ecosystem, what you are looking in terms of the investment and the business should look forward. Let us hear from Mr. Jain.
According to me, all of us have a sort of notion that it's the job of the government. It's the government which has to introduce reforms. It's the government who has to change the legislation and regulations. It's the government who has to sort of implement ease of business. Everything, the investment also need to be triggered in terms of infrastructure and technology by the government. I am asking you, you see the trend, where is private investment? How many companies or how many sectors are investing in capex, new plants, new technologies, innovation, or even on people? There are hardly anything, are hardly any companies. There are hardly any sectors. Maybe e-commerce is the one which is expanding. That's the latest trend. Few years ago, it was the IT sector. A few years ago, it was the automobile sector. So it's in bits and pieces. So I think overall, if you see, it's sort of a wait and watch, policy. Every company, every industry is following, and then the whole focus or the pressure or the entire onus falls on the government. What has the government done for us? There is so much of restrictions and regulations and labor laws. So see, government is doing everything in terms of change of legislations. It's pumping in liquidity. It's changing tax reforms. It's introducing new labor reforms. It's introducing new agri reforms. There are fundamental and radical changes happening. So ecosystem is always there. I'm sorry, I will slightly extend. I thought I will speak when the students start asking questions, but I will.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I will now go. Let's talk about students or our own thinking. As I said at the start, we need to become a developed country or a rich country. Yes, in terms of ranking, we are in the fifth or the sixth, very equal or close to UK in terms of GDP, 2.65 trillion, etc., etc. But don't you think all of us, the entire country has got a very risk averse attitude? Even the industry has such a risk averse attitude. Why have we been importing from so long? Or why have we become so dependent on China for all the inputs? Because, it's costly to manufacture, it's so easy to import, it's much cheaper to import from China. But have we really done any kind of, you talk about research and development in pharmaceutical. How many patents have we filed from India? Hardly anything. So where is that culture? Right from childhood, somebody teaches us you need to get good admission in a good college, then you need to do post graduation in a good institute, and then you need to get a good job, and then you need to get a good salary, etc., etc., and then you will get settled down. So how many students, whether it is from IIT, and let me motivate you also, 52% of the CEOs are from IITs and IIMs. So the postgraduates or the engineers who come out of IITs and the MBA graduates from IIM, they have a very good future. If they can become the CEOs in 52% of the companies or industry, that shows that there is a very, very bright future. Why is there a brain drain of going for abroad education? Why? So even the education system is being revamped. So government is doing its part, but you need to ask yourself. Every industry, every company needs to ask themselves that how much investment we are putting in people, how much investment we are putting in new capex, or even technology, or innovation, or research. So I think it has to, the private sector and the public sector, in very simple words, have to really come together to make India self-reliant. Otherwise, 4 years later, some new government will come, there'll be new policies, and then once again the election agenda will be what Modi has done in last 10 years.
I'm not coining anyone.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not commenting, nor I'm a big fan of any politics or politicians. But then this is the normal rhetoric which is going on from last 74 years. Governments change, policies change, reforms are made. The economy is opened up in 1990s, foreign investment comes. But then is there not an onus on the Indian industry? And let me just touch upon that there is hardly any, what you call good connectivity or coordination between center and states. COVID has shown very clearly, center issues a notification, state does not follow, it does not reach the local level, and there is total chaos, migration, or the migrants
Do
keep
you
on
understand,
walking.
Mr. Jayan, that there is a huge disconnect between what the center think today and the way forward plan in terms of what is getting executed at the grassroots level, right? So there is a disconnect between what the policies are, the governance that matters to the country, as well as the implementation in terms of reforming the state of the art, that what you have mentioned, right? So as we all move forward, right? So we do understand, like for us, yes, reforms means what you have stated, what other panelists have stated. That reform means we need to have some courage. We need to make some bold decisions in terms of that in terms of we are ensuring that it is getting implemented. It is not only within the words, it has to be implemented in a time bound manner, so that it and there should be a benefit that to be realized and linked to each of this initiative that we are running, whether it is a government initiative or whether it is a private sector or it is in the multinational companies that the people are working today, right? So let me understand from Suparna. Suparna, how you feel that yes, we need to take a bold decisions in terms of implementation of those initiatives, as well as uh, from the strategic perspective, what should be my strategic drivers towards it?
Yeah, Rudra. I know that the topic is about Atmanirbhar, and we've talked a lot about the role of the government and different governments and the role of industry. But, I'm just putting myself in the shoes of the students, and I'm thinking, for many of them, this is like, they may be thinking, how do I influence any of it? And I will actually, kind of answer your question a little differently. And I actually come to this point that you said about the strategic measures. And I think it's very interesting that the students are from, they're management students of IIT Kanpur, which is one of the, if not the most foremost technical and engineering colleges in India. And I think there is something that this group of youngsters can think of doing, which probably may not be as, as applicable to other groups of people, which is the, the marriage of the technological part of innovation and putting things together, and the managerial part. So I think that the real value gets, exploded when these two come together. And, we talked about even startups and all of that. So I feel that India and Indians are often the quote unquote back office, right? And so far we've been the back office of IT, and maybe because of the Atmanirbhar approach, we may become the back office for manufacturing more than we have ever been, which is not to say that China is anytime soon stopping to become the factory of the world. But from being a very, very small presence in the manufacturing landscape, maybe we will, and hopefully we will move that up. This comes from not only manufacturing for India and Indian consumers, it also comes from being the what is called the +1 strategy. So we have a lot of American companies and also European, but mostly American companies across centers who have suddenly woken up to the fact that they are so dependent on that one country that they need the +1 country. And the +1 country, honestly, there are many good options. And there are the usual favorites of South Korea and Taiwan. There are new ones like Vietnam. But how do we actually become, the +1 center? So that's one part of it. But I think the second part of it is, you look at Apple, right? Look at iPhones. They're designed in California. They're not made in California. They're designed in California. And I feel that is the point, that while we can and we should become much more of a manufacturing hub for us our own domestic consumers as well as exports, there is an angle of the thought leadership of the IP in the intellectual properties, which comes from deep investment in technology in certain sectors, where India and Indians become the the first choice of many people across the world, where they are coming and saying, okay, can you do this for us? And there I feel that this confluence that we see in this group of young people, which is that they hopefully equally adept at understanding the technology and working on the technology, as well as applying it and thinking of it from a strategic business point of view. I think that could be something that I would really, exhort all of the young people on this group to think about, saying, if I have to make a difference, how do I do it? And I hear, I hear there are, sectors and industries with very high investments, like the semiconductor industry, or in sectors where frankly, the buses come and gone, like solar. But there may be others where it is just starting, where, there are a lot of new and even old technologies which can be something that Indians own the IP. They know the best way of doing it. It's not just about, the frugal innovation thing that I think some people hinted at it, saying that, we are very good at frugal innovation and quote unquote jugaad. But I think the time has come for us as a country and the young people in the country to really invest time and money and entire lives into getting very deep understanding of a particular manufacturing sector or process and really mastering it so that we become the country of choice.
I think you have touched upon the point, Suparna, and it is really a strategic imperative that we all should look forward. And I still believe that all the students, I mean, the young leaders or the tomorrow's leaders of India, they should align themselves with the vertical of the industries in the domain expertise, so that we get more domain expertise coming forward to help and build the notion, right? So that's a great point, Suparna, I would say. And with continuation of that point, I also felt that we should have a home of best fit, right? Because from the childhood, people get pressurized. Okay, you become a doctor, you become an engineer, you become this and that, right? So it should not be, because the education system has, the government has a huge focus now. Government is looking up in terms of a different scalability, different applicability in terms of the industry requirements. And that's where the education system need to be built up, right? So it should be like free for all. It should be based on the passion and based on the, I will say, intention that an individual is having today, and to take the education forward. It should not be, okay, I have to become a metallurgical engineer because I know that the steel sectors are booming. No, that's not be the choice. You know where your potentials are. And as you rightly mentioned, it has to be a mapping of the potential along with the best fit of the industry. So I would say India should be the home of the best fit, and it should be the hub for all in terms of giving the outcomes to the outer world, right? So and let me understand, as we have a professor in the among the panelists, let me understand from Dr. Anub. So what is your thought? Because IIT is also a government institution, right? What is your thought in terms of the skilling, reskilling, and upskilling the students, and you are integrating your course back to the industries so the industry get benefited out of it, or you are planning with the structure, I'll say, what we used to call as a old manner course or the state of the art technological course?
Sure. So Rudra, being part of an educational institution, there is at least one responsibility that we always feel we have for the society, is to be able to address the aspirations of the society in bringing them the skills that they need to make a good earning, and at the same time also enable the ecosystem within the corporate sector to innovate and to grow. Now, as you know, any country, whenever you are passing through a transformation, there are always some adjustments, right? Either, for example, if I mentioned that if you will have, suppose, emergence of electric vehicles in a big way in the country over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, what will happen to the whole ancillary industry which has been set up, and which is an excellent example of the cohesive growth of the sector. Now, if that is something we face, this means these people who are currently employed with the ancillary sector and auto sector, they need really a different set of skills altogether. They need to know about battery mode, they need to know about motors mode, they need to know more about the IT integration of all the technologies, right, including artificial intelligence, which means the education system itself will have to rediscover itself in terms of what kind of skills will be required and what kind of retraining would be required. The second important thing is that the institutions like IITs, of course, will not be able to address the need, at least physically, they have not been able to address the need of training across the sectors, right? But it is definitely able to train the trainers who themselves go ahead and then train furthermore. But given the fact that now the COVID has given us a big opportunity, in some sense, I will use that term, that the education sector is emerging on the online platform. And there, I think the IITs can do much more in terms of their ability to showcase the educational skills that they have, that they are currently imparting only to the students who are generally present on the campus. But now they can be designing modules, and which is already happening. In fact, we are also working on certain modules for the energy sector itself, which will be useful for the not just country as a whole, but for the world. I mean, like it is said, if we have to really emerge like a Vishwa Guru, we really start to think of that. And I think this is a place where we should not be missing an opportunity, and we are already working toward it.
So let me understand one thing, Professor Anub. So as I'm just talking from on behalf of the IBM, right? So government invited us in terms of working with the CBSE curriculum and putting up the AI, the Watson platform and other things, right? And as you mentioned, like the digital learning is going to be a new dimension and the new industry for us to understand, right? Because that's where it's going to play a big pivotal role, right? So how you are integrating from the IIT perspective, how you are integrating with the industries, right? Whether to bring them up to the speed, to invite them into your learning modules,
sure,
to describe your learning modules, which is going to be included in terms of serving their requirement, not only to that specific industries, but also the consumer of those industries. Because I am talking from the client to client, right? This has to be a rolling chain where the learning should flow on, and that should be aligned with the industries.
Sure. So let me describe this in terms of, you can say, the education supply chain, right? If we look at the internal production process for the education that we produce within our campuses,
it's a good word, education supply chain. I really appreciate the word that you call out. Education supply chain.
It starts with the design of a curriculum, right? So within our department, suppose when we are designing a curriculum, so we are not doing it within the boundaries of the department. We don't do that. First of all, of course, it is debated within the department. It also opens up to the institute level, but we really take pain in reaching out to the industry to understand what is their need at this hour. In fact, there have been instances, we actually have we had a specialized committee which were looking after that, how we are going to change our MBA program, the MTech program, and the PhD program, and what industry feels about it. What is it that they want us to be introduced? How do they think that our pedagogy needs to change, right? So that's the first stage of it, that at the time of designing the curriculum itself, the program itself, we seek industry input. And then next comes to the delivery of it. So when it comes to delivery of our education, as of now, as a sort of a ballpark number, roughly 15% of our sessions can be delivered by industry experts. Given that we are a department which is always interfacing with the industry, we endeavor a lot to include and invite the industry leaders to bring their thought processes and engage with the students. And it gives us two advantages. It gives advantages to the students that they know what's happening in the industry. And it of course gives us educators also an inputs that we are in touch with what's happening in the industry and what does the industry feel about the kind of education we have imparted to the students. And they will get to understand the feedback. We will be able to get the feedback about how we need to improve. And the third level of course, interaction happens when we send the students for internships. And in all the three these steps, we ensure that we interact as closely as possible with the industry. And within the department, we also have what is called as a capstone project. And in fact, this is a very unique feature of our MBA program. And we have ensured that these capstone projects are developed keeping in view a problem which comes from the industry. And that's the fourth step where we are ensuring that our interaction with the industry brings much more value to the students and to the industry as a whole.
That's great. That's great to know. That's great to know. Let me quickly understand, like, because so you are producing in the supply chain. I will say I like the word. I like the word education supply chain. So you are producing the products, right? So the product need to be absorbed by the industries, right? And in this particular aspect, let me ask Arul and Puneet on this specific lines. So the product which Professor Anub is producing in the IIT Kanpur, how the India Inc. Going to take the advantage of it and trusting that they are the best of the best product of the world, right? So I feel the IITians or the IIMs are the best of the best products that India is producing at this point of time, relating to the word that Professor Anub has mentioned in terms of the education supply chain. So what is your thought, Anub and Arul, on this particular matter? And then we'll move into the Q&A where the audience has been plugged a lot of questions for us.
Okay, see, I think let me start this. See the students coming from, if you look at the successful people in the United States, these are all students from India also coming from the same education system, right? I think where we have a gap today is in our graduate programs. You know, our undergraduate programs are definitely the best, right? Where the graduate programs, there is definitely a gap in terms of the research orientation, maybe the quality of the projects. In fact, when I did my PhD, the only thing my professor wanted me to learn was you have to think independently. You have to be able to define a problem and solve it, right? Which no one has done before. And you have to have that confidence when you get out of a PhD. And I think that's how the PhD and master's programs have to be oriented, right? So I think that it's really the environment that defines what these people do post they graduate. Correct. So I think that's what maybe we are not there. Our corporates are not there to the level of providing that environment of innovation. Of course, I am currently leading innovation in Tata Power, and Titan is a good example of innovation. But I think at the industry level, we need to provide these environments of innovation for these youngsters coming into the space. And I think a couple of things I want to touch on also for the youngsters, like you talked about AIoT, because the IoT plus AI, I think it's going to be a big driver in mobility, in energy also, in a smart home. And I think smart home is getting connected to energy efficiency. And I think buildings being a 6% of the carbon dioxide emitters, they all have to become smart and efficient and change technologies, right? So I think in this context, these are areas like Professor Anub said, these are all low-hanging fruits that can be easily harnessed by students or youngsters who want to start. In fact, I encourage students to become entrepreneurs, right? Because I think that is something we have to have a culture of encouraging students. I think the universities have, IIT Madras has it, IIT Kanpur also has incubation centers. I think, in fact, a lot of this Atmanirbhar will come from these innovative startups that the students engage themselves and they're not dependent on some corporate boss giving them that environment.
Absolutely.
They should have the ideas. They should create these ideas. And I think the opportunity cost of doing a startup at the start of a career is less also. That's not a big opportunity cost. So I think people should take advantage of it and get into thinking of ideas, concepts into the new things,
Right,
and see
right.
how to do it. And then
Yeah.
one more point, one other thing I want to say is, look, of course, there are a lot of new areas. I talked about hydrogen, I talked about carbon capture, I talked about electrification of fossil fuel processes, right? But there's a good example in India of, if you take the scooter manufacturing, I know there are a lot of articles written on it also, where India has taken a huge Atmanirbhar, succeeded in that. And if you take that model of starting with a joint venture, developing the R&D capability, technology capability in-house, and then letting go of the joint venture partner and becoming an Indian company, I think it's a good model that could be propagated in hydrogen or some other areas also.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good pointer, Arul, and I think we should also ask government in terms of funding more into those lines where we can have our Indian resources captive in India for all good thing that government is thinking of the self-reliant India. So resources, I mean to say, as per, I like the word of Professor Anub, resources, I mean to say the students, right, for us, because they are the future leader. So Puneet, let me quickly have your views in 2 minutes, and then I'll move on to the Q&A, and there are a lot of people who was trying to reach out to us with the questions.
I think we could start with the Q&A, Rudra, since we're running short of time. Let's go ahead with the Q&A.
So I'll pass on to the IITians to give us the questions, and we'll be more than happy to respond to you.
Sure, sir. We can start taking questions now. So first we have Pratik Nati with his question. Pratik, you can go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for insightful session. Actually, my question is, when the Chinese economy opened their economy for foreign investment, their economy saw a major boom, and their average labor cost in 1990s was around 150 USD, and now it is around 13,500 USD. And comparative, when we compare it with the India's standard labor cost, it is around 2,000 USD. So how influential this parameter can be in realizing the dream of India as a manufacturing hub?
So I'll pass on to the manufacturer. Okay, let me understand from Suparna on this.
So I don't know how I'm uniquely qualified to answer this question, but I'll try and understand. So from what I understand, your question was really saying that the average labor cost in India is currently more favorable compared to the average labor cost in China. Is that what you're hinting at?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that may be true, and it is an opportunity, but I think a lot of it is about skilling. And it is about, China did the big manufacturing boom for exports. And we, apart from one or two sectors like garments, etc., we never had that big opportunity of exports. So somewhere when a country's manufacturing ecosystem is oriented and based on export demand, the systems, the processes, the skills, the capabilities, the R&D, everything is pegged at the export countries' levels. And that really makes a lot of difference. So basically, there is a reason why their labor cost is much higher than ours, because there are systems, processes, capabilities, and skills which are at higher levels. Having said that, I do think what you're saying is right. But I think any given labor cost is always to be pegged at what skill, what is the skillability, what is the skilling already done, and what is the employability of that labor. And there, I think there is some way to go. And, we talked about premium institutes and the IITs, but what I really worry for this country is where the bulk of people in manufacturing, the ITIs, what level of value of the education are they getting, education or training or whatever. I think that, as well as the responsibility of industries where they take in freshers and they really, teach the people how to do things, and also to keep reskilling as new technologies come in. So it's not an apple for apple. It's not even an apple for orange. I think maybe there are apples in China, but we are still deciding what fruit we are. I don't know if that helps, Pratik, but probably that's the simplest way in which I can explain what that gap of labor cost is about.
Actually, if I can add something, you see, I think the challenge is not all manufacturing is labor intensive. Labor is only a very small percentage in certain areas of manufacturing. Your textile industry is, yes, highly labor intensive, but others are not. So you have to look at electricity, you have to look at water, you have to look at the other logistics infrastructure, not just labor. Yes, labor is definitely cheaper.
So there are two aspects to it, right? So one is your operational cost, one is your capex, right? And what you are producing. I would say the cost per product, if we can judge those cost per product, and that can be linked with the labor cost, that can be one of the dimension that we could look forward in the coming days. Because as labor, as Arul and Suparna has mentioned, labor cost is not the only factor that is going to drive us into the new dimension, right? So let us pass on to more questions. So Vaibhav, if you have any questions from the audience
Yes,
to come in,
yes, sir.
not only from the IITians or the audience, those who are in, right? So let us understand the questions from them also.
Yes, sir. We have a lot of questions lined up. So
next, with the point of time, I think we have around 10 minutes for the session. If we can extend by 5-10 minutes, that is also good, if that is possible.
Sure, sir. So next we have a question from Shreya Sharma. Shreya, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you for this session. My question is, with increasing privatization of the national assets, what challenges does the country face in becoming a self-reliant nation?
That's a great question, Shreya. Puneet, would you like to take it up?
Yeah, sure. So, I think we discussed some of the challenges, right, Shreya. Apart from that, obviously, I think one of the most important things that we as a country need to do is, Dr. Arul also just touched upon it, is to improve our basic infrastructure, right? Trying to ensure we have uninterrupted power, water, also a good road and rail, as well as port infrastructure. I think we still have a long way to go with respect to other developed countries. If you look at China, even when I used to visit China in 1998 or 2000, their infrastructure was far, far superior to India, what it is today. And I'm not talking about Beijing or Shanghai. I've even visited smaller cities near the Mongolian border, and their infrastructure 20 years back was far superior than what we have today. So I think we really need to do a lot in terms of infrastructure development. We have the talent. Obviously, we have to work towards improving our labor laws, also work towards improving our health infrastructure, education infrastructure. A lot of different things need to be done. It's all sort of, outlined in the Self-Reliant India plan. But I think the challenge will be funding for each of this. The plan is great, but everything needs money, right?
Yeah.
How is this going to be funded? And I think Jayant made a great point. Private industry is really not coming up and stepping up and investing. They're only going after whatever is the sunshine industries or where the profit margins are larger, right? What about areas where your margins are not so great? Maybe you need some public-private partnership. So really a lot to be done, and we'll have to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, I think, Puneet, you have touched upon, yes, the infrastructure is a concern today, and I think government need to think aloud if really, really we are looking for the self-reliant India. Infrastructure, the investment on the private things has to be the which Jayant has mentioned in the beginning itself. So yes, that has to be the on a priority for the government, that all that we could suggest as a panelist to the government. So let us move to the next question.
Sure. We have a question from Amrit Patak. Amrit, you can go ahead.
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes,
yes,
Amrit,
you are audible.
please go ahead.
So, as we were talking about that, the to sort of gain equal standing with the other competitive markets in the global landscape. My understanding is that if we go by the general, economic theories, that we understand that the trade deficit kind of import-exports tend to balance out themselves in the long run. And so the focus needs to be not just to that, the starting point should be that we increase our productivity, and that will in turn reduce our import burdens. Not that the import burdens first need to be reduced somehow by grasping any straw that we can, without really thinking about the productivity. So there I wanted to basically know your thoughts that are somehow, is the public discourse or the discourse
So you're breaking off, Amrit.
in general is somehow grasping at the wrong our imports and not really focusing on the increase of our productivity.
So let me pass on to Jayant, and would like to on this. He will be more than happy to take it up.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy. See, I think you need to understand the fundamental point. As I said, we are exports negative. In very simple words, only 20% of our GDP is coming from exports. With respect to China, 70% comes from export earnings. So in other words, a lot of foreign exchange is being spent on inputs. And as I said, we are a major importer of military supplies, gold and oil. So it's very important to turn the needle on the other side. And how can we, today, India is more like a demand market for the whole world. Our population is 135 crores. And, even though the 80% of our consumption is local or is coming from domestic demand, it's very important. And that is where the world sees as an opportunity, and a lot of foreign institutions or foreign companies or MNCs are attracted to set up shop and set up their plant. Any product you launch, there is so much of volume available. 135 crore population, that itself is a major resource or an asset for any company to invest. So it's very important that, let me clarify, I am not hinting on import substitution. In other words, if yesterday we were importing from China, so let us import from Japan or Vietnam or Singapore, the world will go on. No, the clear vision document of Atmanirbhar says that we need to reduce imports. Whatever is not available, we are okay to import. But then whatever can be substituted by local resources, local manufacturing, local inputs should be done. And secondly, the quality and the productivity should be really raised to a higher level, so that we become more like a supply market rather than being just a demand market from so many years. So I hope that answers your question, Amrit.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's great. That's a great point of view, Jayant. Thanks. Let us move on to the next one, please.
Yes, we have a question from Arun Goel. Arun, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, sure. So with the widening gap of the income inequality in our country, so we have seen recent reforms in the labor laws as well. So I just want to understand what exactly from industry perspective companies are doing, so that they are upbringing the lower strata of the country, so that in whatever government is reforming, so they are not keeping the companies are not capitalizing on if the lower strata is on yeah.
Sorry, I'm unable to follow your question, Arul. If you can just.
Yeah, sorry, sir. I got. So
I can answer that, Rudra. I got it.
Yeah. Okay, Puneet, please.
Okay, so I think it's a great question, Arun. You saw that the government changed MCA changed the rules a few years back, wherein they said it's sort of mandatory for companies to invest 2 to 3% of their profits on CSR. So, that's been happening. I could say most of the large corporates, including all the multinationals, even companies like us, which are pure KPOs or IT companies, we are focusing on putting 2 to 3% of our profits into CSR activities. So yes, that's being done, but obviously a lot more that needs to be done. And I think we still have a long way to go to uplift those who are not who are at a disadvantage. So it really a lot more to be done. But I think it's not just companies that could do this. It's the NGOs and each one of us as individuals that need to work towards upliftment.
I think Jayant has a point.
Yeah.
For
So Puneet, just to add to what Puneet said, again going back to the figures, yes, the current changes or laws or regulations are directed on labor class or even the MSME sector or even the cottage industry, because let us understand, whenever a crisis happens, whether it is a financial crisis or even a COVID, it exposes whom? It does not expose the rich class. And yes, there is a gap between the rich and the poor class, and it is growing, and it is across the world. 5% of the rich class hold 95% of the wealth. So this is there across the world. Let's understand. And let's talk about middle class with respect to India. Middle class consists of around 50%, and they are the ones who are the driver of demand. What is the average salary of middle class? It is around 8.5 lakhs to 10 lakhs. That's what the definition of middle class is. So it is very, very important that we focus on one more point I can say, exports. 40% of exports comes from the MSME sector. So it is very important that these are the sectors, whether it is just second to agriculture. So it's important that we focus on farmers, MSME, laborers, the middle class, basically who are, the most affected. And they are the ones, who pick up the demand of the economy. So therefore, it is very important that the reforms are targeted towards this particular sector, not only just from education, but also from upskilling point of view, and the right investment goes in these sectors because they are the fastest drivers. It is not just those large manufacturing sector or services. These MSME sector or even agricultural sector or even cottage industry sector that can really push exports and be a game changer.
Yes, thank you, Puneet, thank you, Jayant, for the insight, and I think it was been well answered. Let me see, because we are on the top of the time. It is almost 6 p.m. Let me understand from the Baiva where we stand. Do we have few more questions to take in?
Yes, sir. There are a lot of questions running right now, but we will take a couple of last questions.
So let me check Baiva with the panelists how they are comfortable in terms of their timings. So Suparna, Arul, Puneet, Jain, are we good?
It's 18 hours.
If we see my Mac starts talking.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be happy.
Yeah, no problem.
I think we can take a few more questions. Yeah.
Okay, so we can take a few more questions and then we will have the closure, right? And let us understand from the other audience apart from the MBA students, okay? If
Sure,
there are
sure.
any.
Sure. So next we have a question from Siddharth. Siddharth, you can go ahead with the question.
First of all, thank you everyone for the insightful session. So my question is, like the government has recently changed the definition of MSMEs in India, so they can achieve economies of scale and also help them to grow bigger. Also from the demand side, we have seen the government is encouraging the consumers in India to buy domestic products and become vocal for local. So, but it also comes up with a trade-off in short term. So how much do you think Indians are ready to adopt the Indian products, given they are usually at a higher price and relatively low quality?
This is a great question, Siddharth. I mean to say this is a really, really great question because we still feel that we need to wear our money or something else, and let's the showbiz goes on. But if we are keeping the quality and the kind of value that is we are producing in India, it is comparable with the world standards. I would say Indian products, some of the Indian products are much better than the world standards, and it has been built by Indian. And if you are going with the world in terms of the retail or the CPG industry, if you are going with all those things, so mostly products have been designed, so the designers are also from India. The products have been manufactured with the vision that the Indian has put up. And Suparna, I would pass on this question to Suparna as well, because she leads one of the adorable brand of India, that's Titan, right? So we all the watches that we wear is Titans. So let's understand from Suparna to the question that Siddharth has.
Yeah, Siddharth. So I wouldn't fully agree with you. I don't agree that Indian products are higher priced and lesser in quality. And I will not leave this chance to actually talk a little about a product that we have called the Titan Edge. And it's the slimmest watch, and it has been for many years. And it is something that is an outstanding piece of engineering marvel. It's not that easy to make it. In fact, there is a reason why other people don't make it. We have a ceramic version of that called the Ceramic Edge, and that sells at around 24,000 rupees. And we also deal with, we are business partners with almost all the big watch companies, somehow or the other, because we also have our own multi-brand retail chain called Helios. So we are business partners with many of our competitors. And our competitors actually come and tell us that if you had been anything other than an Indian brand, you would have sold that at 4 times. That product is, easily something that should be sold at much, much higher price points. And there is a reason why we don't, though, you can talk about the investment in technology, but frankly, that's been capitalized a long time back. It's simply because the philosophy of a Tata brand and of a brand like Titan is that we want to offer exceptional quality, exceptional design, exceptional service, customer service at very affordable prices. So we don't want to be so premium that, the top 5% that Jayant was talking, it doesn't matter to us. I would rather sell millions of watches to millions of Indians and make profit, whatever profit we make. So I don't know if there are a lot of companies with the same philosophy. I mentioned another brand called Amul earlier on, but I would really urge you, Siddharth, to look at where are the gaps? Where is that? Finally, there is a customer value proposition. There is a price and there is a value. The value is a bundled offering, right? There are many things in that value. And where are the gaps? And as Indians, where do we think, in which sector that gap can be bridged by us? And that is the real meaning of Atmanirbhar, where we are both, and it kind of goes back to the earlier question that another student had asked, which is, what is the role of, how are corporates responsible? Sure, corporates are responsible by doing charity and philanthropy through CSR funds, but corporates are also responsible for designing products and services that are meant for the average Indian. Our job is to serve Indians. So, Indians are also consumers. They're also producers. They're also citizens, but they're also consumers. So the dignity and the respect that we offer Indians by designing the right product at the right price for them is something that I would urge all of you people, all of the youngsters, to think about in greater depth. Think about it.
Yeah, I think Suparna, you have rightly mentioned the points, right? And I would like to add on one of the points. There are a lot of Indian brands, whether across the supply chain, across the industries, which are producing the best fit product to consume by the Indians, because the value that we are giving, as Suparna mentioned, of the value proposition. So understanding the customer needs, translating that customer needs into my business requirement, producing that product which exactly matching in terms of both stated and unstated needs of the business. And that is giving, because Indians has a different, not only Indians, all the country they have the different notions, they have a different intent to understand the value and the needs, both from the stated and the unstated factors. So if you ask as an Indian, if Suparna is offering me a Titan watch, I would ask, well, can I buy one, get one free? So, and that too on a premium watch, right? So we all look for in terms of the retail market, we'd all look for the e-commerce, where is the offers running? So that's the mindset it plays to us. We don't look what is the amount or the value that is getting integrated in terms of producing that product, right? So we as a student, I would appreciate if you all look into the customer value chain for each of this aspect, from the opportunity, from the demand and the fulfillment. So there should be, if there is any gap between the demand and the fulfillment and the entire supply chain process, that's what you should call out. You should try to understand what is the value that supply chain is bringing from the end-to-end perspective. So this is a transformation journey, and we should all be part of it.
Sure. There is a question coming up for Arul sir. So sir, as we know that the natural resources are being gobbled up faster than the earth can replenish them. So in order to cater the needs of the individual, the process of artificial photosynthesis is used. So what is the scope of the technology, and how can the technology act as a reservoir of the energy to make India as a self-reliant country?
Arul, is all yours.
See, artificial photosynthesis is for carbon dioxide absorption and hydrogen, right? That's certainly, the afforestation is one method of doing it. And so you do afforestation and then you replace the carbon dioxide you're producing in your coal plant. But the amount of land, the time it takes is a long process, right? And the chemical methods of doing that exist, but I think they're still, in my mind, maybe 15, 20 years away, right? So the way I see the transition happening out of fossil fuels is the brown hydrogen, what you call the brown hydrogen that we are producing today with the carbon dioxide emissions. I think that should start replacing fossil fuels in the process industries or wherever they're used. And I think in the next phase, this brown hydrogen will become blue hydrogen, where the blue is where the carbon dioxide is also captured. Okay, and then it will become a green hydrogen, which is the purest form where you do electrolysis with solar and wind power. Right, so I'd see a transition, but I think we have to go in two ways. We have to start using hydrogen into our processes, and we should become a hydrogen economy, independent of the source of hydrogen. And in parallel, we should also bring the production of green hydrogen. I think so. You should have two parallel paths ongoing. I think the electrification has happened in the same way. If you take, we have fossil fuels, we have solar, wind, right? So now we know how to produce clean electricity, and now we are replacing the fossil fuel electricity with clean. I think the hydrogen economy will take the same path. Yes, afforestation, photosynthesis, these are all concepts, but I think in terms of what will come into the commercialization, I think they're still a little bit far from commercialization.
Yeah, I can see all the colors behind you, Arul. All this green, blue, brown colors are reflecting in the background. So I can see how the transition is getting mapped over there.
No, see, what it is I wanted to show that's like a zero. In fact, I'm going to talk to Suparna after this, because I want to do a zero carbon mall or a zero carbon store.
I was just thinking, I must connect with you, Arul. I'm fascinated by this rainbow hydrogen that you have. I had never heard of it before. So clearly I have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, zero carbon store is what I want to push for. And I think this is something the students can also do. It's nothing rocket science that only Tata can do or you cannot do. But
so Arul, we all would love to hear that zero carbon footprint. Okay, so that's where everybody is looking today. And yes, zero carbon stores. Oh, that's a great theme.
And that's a small thing that can be done today, because electricity costs are quite high for the commercials. I think if I can do a building integrated photovoltaic with these colorful, beautiful things in the background, and then I add hydrogen generation and get solar, I think we can do a zero carbon mall or a zero carbon factory also. In fact, there are some instances in Germany where they've done a 2 to 3 megawatt factory, which is zero carbon, right? I think it's early stages, but I think
so let's reconnect on this, and I would request Professor Anup if we can set up some time. Let's all of us catch with the students on the zero carbon part, right? So let's make it zero carbon as in the self-reliant journey. Okay. So moving to Vaibhav,
I think Vaibhav, please take note of this, that we need to really organize a roundtable on zero carbon business. Sure. And I'm sure we will find enough interest within the student community also, because this is something, an emerging area as company turn into zero carbon. And of course, not just adopting renewable energy, but also in terms of the energy efficiency and analytics, which earlier Rudra mentioned.
Yeah, that will be great. Let's understand the sustainability of those, right? So moving to Vaibhav, please, the next part.
Yes, yes, sir. So before concluding the event formally, we would like to have a beautiful video we have for all of the audience.
So do we have any more questions?
We have a lot of questions, sir, actually. The time.
Okay, so what I would appreciate, Vaibhav, I mean to say we all are connected over the LinkedIn. And if anyone needs some specific guidance, we are here being a mentor. I think on behalf of the entire panel, I can vouch for it. We will be more than happy to mentor you all. Okay, sure. Also we'll be more than happy to take any question, and you can share our LinkedIn profiles with everyone so they can reach out to us. And also you have our email IDs. You can take a note of the question. You can plug into us. We will be more than happy to respond, because we were looking for the future leaders to grow. So I'm taking the consent from all the panelists. So we are okay with it, right? So we can be the future of all.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would like
to just a small thing, because we would be more than happy if I'm just opening up to the panel once again in terms of the entrepreneurship. Let us hear from 2 minutes from each of them, because that's the one which everybody is willing to take up, right? And to guide us. So I'll start with Arul, if you want to take it up, and then we'll move on to everyone.
See, I think one thing I wanted to tell the students is, look, I think there's a nice article by Clayton Christians. And I think at the end of your life, the thing you have to ask is not how much revenue you make or how many profits you made, but what impact you made on the people you work with and on the society, right? And I think there are, and I'm not saying go into an NGO and do social service. You can do businesses, you can create new ideas, make lots of money. So pick areas where you can make an impact, not just financially for yourself, but also for the society and for the overall global development. And of course, today my theme was climate change, so I would say stick to climate change today. But I think, but that's not the only theme where we can make an impact on the society and the people. But so when you're looking at careers and opportunities, please look at it that way and come up with innovations in these new segments. I think we can be the leaders.
Oh, thanks, Arul. Thanks, Arul. And let me before I move on to Suparna, I just wanted to make one small thing for the student itself. So, see, the topic that we have discussing for the last 2 hours, the self-reliant India. That does not mean that the country is really reliant today on the outside in the strategic sector. So let's think aloud. Let's think aloud in terms of how we can make reliant in the various sectors, not stick to only one sectors or only one industries or only one way of looking the business visions. So let's understand how we can have a multi-dimensional aspect into the business. We will be more than happy to get in touch with you all in terms of our support can be provided, whether it is getting the entrepreneurship, mentorship, and other stuff. So Suparna, over to you.
I have a very simple message, which is that all of the students of IIT Kanpur, you have the passport of knocking at any angel fund investment, any kind of startup fund, because of the word IIT, and that only you guys have. Very few people have. And we know in the last 10-15 years how many unicorns have come out of people from the IITs who've just decided that I don't want to do the usual working in corporate sector. and they have set up. So that advantage is yours, grab it. But I feel that COVID has given you an opportunity. There's no point running after those few jobs. Start off on your own, be brave, be confident. I'm sure you will all come up tops.
Thanks, Suparna. Let's move to Jayant.
Yeah, so absolutely right. And if you see all the policies of the government or reforms or change in laws are focusing on entrepreneurship, uh, focusing on funding, improving the liquidity, etc. I'll give you one tip also. Since there is a lot of anti-China sentiment all across the world, there is a huge opportunity for India in the telecom and the technology sector to really grab on today's date. So, as you rightly said, and as the other panelists said, you do have a passport of the IIT, and in fact, I would request the institute also to encourage that every student, before he does a passing out, needs to have at least 3 business ideas he needs to present, and what support he needs either from the industry or government or the institute, as part of the ecosystem to motivate him to start his own business. Let me tell you, even a small business requires minimum 20 employees directly, and indirectly employees minimum 30, and from there it grows. So we need more Bansals and Agarwals and Jains and whatnot, to be very honest. And let us not restrict the entire wealth to Adanis and Ambanis. So that's what, just a request.
That's a good point, Jan. Yes, yeah. So it is not only sticking to a one particular community, right? So not only Bansal Adanis or Jay or anyone, right? So it can be Sangmud Darshan, it can be Singh, it can be Roy, it can be Mitra. So it is open to all. I'm just making a quick
yeah, we need more.
what we're discussing. So it's a good point, Jan. And I will move to Punit.
Yeah, so I think, each one of you have said it very well. All I would say is, today's students are, really focused on the startup world, right? I know I could talk about my son. I had to sort of push him not to go through the startup route, but they're all focused towards it. And I think each one of you really needs to follow your passion and dreams, right? Whether it's starting something of your own, or whether you want to work somewhere for a few years and then start something of your own. Like Suparna put it, you're there with the best minds, you can knock at any door. And if you look at it today, the VC world, there's billions and billions of dollars of funding that's there. All we have to do is come up with a great idea, and it's definitely going to get recognized. It may take a few years of really hard work, but you're all young, you're educated, talented. Definitely you can easily do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Punit. And as I mentioned, like, yes, you are the future leader for us, right? I would say that tomorrow is going to look what you are going to deliver to India, right? So that's what, because we are getting old, and even the government is getting older. So you have to drive the force. You have to be the change agent. You have to drive through a lot of passion, right? And which is going to benefit our country. So, and say, Professor Anup, you have a lot of work to do after this session, I do believe, and there are a lot of homeworks to be done by you in coordination with the students.
So let me just add something. I'm sure if I'm not out of turn, but given the context of entrepreneurship you mentioned, the IIT Kanpur actually places a good amount of emphasis on encouraging entrepreneurial drive of the students. In fact, we have 2 incubation centers here on campus. And I myself, I was mentoring one of the company, which is called Noka Robotics. And this is set up by 2 graduates from IIT Kanpur. And they essentially were able to design and deliver a dry solar panel cleaning system at 150 cost. And they have been able to do it very, very well. And the advantage that MBA students have here is that they can actually team up with some of those who have technological ideas and they have the business prowess. And I'm sure both of them can really grow together and bring something and at least make this a fruitful outcome for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think that's what we need to have from all the institutions in India. And with a closing remark from the particular discussion that we had today, it was very, very insightful. I think we all, everyone has enjoyed, and it was lively, interactive, I would say, in that way. And I would close with a remark before I pass on to Vaibhav. I would say, yes, today what we have discussed, the rest of the world should hold India in a high regards. The Indian Institute, whether it is an IIT or the IIMs or any institute, should have a high regards in all respect and all dimension. And our country should trust all those institutions and their products. So it is not that, okay, we have to go outside of the India for our higher studies or anything. India has the potential, and the capability. Let's partner with each other and let's leverage it. And everyone can be a trustworthy partner in this ecosystem. That's all from my side.
Thank you, sir. Now I will request Saurabh to play the video before we formally conclude the session.
Sure, Babu. So it's just a minute video showing our journey of Prabandhan and our events that we have conducted, we are conducting for these 3 days. So allow me a minute to share my screen. Babu, let me know once it is visible.
Yeah, it is visible now.
Okay. Babu, you can continue now.
Yeah, okay. So on this beautiful video note, I would like to thank all our speakers for taking out their time and enlightening us through this deep dive session, where the topic was discussed from almost all perspectives, like supply chain, where Mr. Mengani quoted, supply chain is a lifeline to self-reliant India. Then Ms. Suparna Mitra shed light on the business models, and she even brought the importance of MSMEs to this platform. Then Mr. Puneet Jain pointed out how having our self-reliant ships is an important step towards self-reliant India. Then we had Dr. Arul discussing on how important it is to consider climate change while working towards self-reliant India. While we were all moving towards a self-reliant India, then we had Dr. Anub Singh. He made us realize that we cannot be self-reliant in all sectors. But he also gave the solution that we'll have to concentrate on the other alternate opportunities we have. And last but not least, we had Mr. Rudra Shankar Roy swiftly moderating and giving his insights on almost all perspectives. So on behalf of MBA IIT Kanpur fraternity, I thank you all once again for quite an elucidating session. And personally, I would like to even thank all of you for taking your interest in giving us tips and advices that we are going to carry forward for our future endeavors. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a good evening, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.